On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, I welcome Christine Gruetzmacher to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Diagnosed with thyroid cancer at age 38, Christine, a wife and mother of three, faced her journey with strength, courage, and faith. She shares the strategies that helped her through, from mindfulness and breathwork to yoga and seeking professional support. Christine's story is inspiring. This will be a good one. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up wherever you are, whatever you are doing? I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios just north of our great capital city of Madison, Wisconsin today. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at TDecora8791, as well as hitting me up on Facebook at Tim Decora. Also, the Survive and Thrive 8791 has a Facebook page, so that got launched just recently. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or like button wherever you listen to the show. Leave me a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to share their story, email me at tdecora@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will air on Monday and Thursday morning featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as, but not limited to, grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, divorce, success despite challenges, etc. Our goals will share how they learn to survive and thrive. According to the internet, and the internet is always right, correct, Christine?
Of course. If it's on the internet, it's got to be true.
It's got to be true. Each year, on the average, 31,000 women are diagnosed with thyroid cancer in the U.S. each year. That's about 0.02%. Now, I'm not a math guy, but Google is, so they figured that out for me, of all women, according to the most recent population data that I could find from 2023. So it's kind of rare, but 31,000 women is still a lot. Today, I welcome Christine Gruetzmacher to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Born and raised in Philadelphia, PA, Christine is an alum of Archbishop Ryan High School, where she played softball and field hockey. After high school, she would take her talents to Bloomsburg University of Pennsylvania in Bloomsburg, PA, a proud Husky. After graduation, she would venture into a professional career where she has worn many hats. Marriage and motherhood would allow Christine to be a full-time stay-at-home mom where she has raised three amazing kids. She went back to work after 13 years home with the kiddos. Currently, she is a reimbursement education liaison at Sanofi. Additionally, she loves to volunteer and enjoys her kids' events. I'm so glad you could join us, Christine Gruetzmacher. What is up?
What is up?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
Well, it's kind of early, and I'm glad you know a guy because we are out at the ice pond here in Waunakee, Wisconsin, and
Go Warrior Hockey.
Go Warrior Hockey. You know, you're one of those people who knows a guy, and so you got us in here today. But I've been here before, so it's.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don. Shout out to Don. This is where we share a little banter, go back and forth, and also just realize that the podcast is just you and I chit-chatting, but there's a little formality here, so we'll follow along, but we're going to go back and forth. But I do want to start out by chanting E-A-G-L-E-S.
Eagles.
Eagles. How about your Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles?
I'm happy for my dad. Huge fan in Philly. I know despite my boys and their dislike for the Eagles, I'm happy for my dad to get a W.
Really? Your boys dislike
baby.
you? They're Packer guys.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it was good to be an Eagle on Sunday. My college basketball coach is from, I think I mentioned to you before, is from Chester, PA. And I tried calling him before the game to get his score prediction, and he did not answer, and that's okay. but I was happy for him as well. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure there was a lot of trouble to be had that evening in Philly and in NOLA.
NOLA, yes. Archbishop Ryan High School. A lot of times I get in the bio, I get the full bio, and a lot of times I don't. So it's kind of fun to look up some of these places that I've never heard of, although I know Philly has a lot of Catholic schools and like the Catholic basketball league,
Yep.
which is kind of what I used to follow when I was younger, has a lot, sent out a lot of really good college players, high school players. But are you a proud Raider, I guess, for the boys, or ragdoll for the girls?
Obviously, as a female, I would identify with the rag dolls, but now I think everybody's a Raider. So back in the day when my mom went there, it was such a large school, but it was closed off in the middle. So girls were on the left side of the building, which were the ragdolls, and the boys were on the right side. They were the Raiders. By the time I got to high school, I think numbers were down, and so they opened it up to everybody. So I think we're all considered Raiders.
Raiders, okay.
But it's one of the largest schools in Philly, and so I think I had like a graduating class of 600, and that was many, many years ago.
600 times 2,400 high school kids is a big school.
It's big.
Interesting.
Yep,
And a
but-
Catholic high school?
Yep, 12 years of Catholic school, and it's funny because if you talk to anybody who grew up in Philly, you'd be asking them, where'd you go to high school? And so that would be able to identify where you grew up. And you'd be like, oh, I went to Ryan. Oh, I went to St. Hubert's. I went to Conwell Egan. So you just basically knew where somebody grew up, if it was in Philly or otherwise, just based on the name of the school.
And if you knew somebody from a certain school, then you probably knew about another dozen people because you got introduced, and it was good stuff.
Totally.
Bloomberg University of Penn. So when I did a little research on that, is that the same as Commonwealth University Bloomberg?
You know, I'm assuming that it might have had a name change. Again, I graduated back in 1998. I don't.
You're just a baby.
So I don't know if there was a name change, but much like we know in Wisconsin, it's like a chain of state schools that kind of collaborate around Madison. There, it's the same thing around Penn State. So it's just one of the like outlying satellite, state colleges that make it up. So
Well, we're getting a little history or a little education here. So Penn State is the equivalent of University of Wisconsin-Madison,
Correct.
and then Bloomsburg would be
La Crosse,
Platteville. Okay.
Totally.
Cool. So I see Sanofi. That's Sanofi, if any of you listeners want to look it up, is an innovative global healthcare company. What does Sanofi specialize in?
So it's French. So some say Sanofi or
Sanofi.
Sanofi. I say Sanofi. I started my career there many years ago. Back in the day, it had a different name. It was Pasteur Mary Canot. It was a vaccine immunization organization, and it was in the Poconos of PA, which wasn't far from Bloomsburg. So now it has merged and been acquired by other companies, but Sanofi is a pharmaceutical company that specializes in medications. It has rare disease. It has immunizations. It's very large and based now in Bridgewater or Massachusetts in Cambridge.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Because I can't wait to hear the rest of your story. We're going to get moving to our sponsor promo. So our sponsor, Buck and Honey's restaurants, are a place that people can escape to. For me, it's a great escape from cooking dinner. I'm the cook,
Same.
usually. With their great food and drink menu, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere, people keep coming back. With locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Wanakee, and Mount Horeb, most communities in the Dane County area can get to a Buck and Honey's within 10 to 15 minutes. Drum roll. Have you been to Buck and Honey's?
Oh, I love Buck and Honey's. Actually, I also prefer when someone else is making me dinner. So I have two favorites, all revolving around the shrimp.
The shrimp.
The flatbread shrimp, or I get shrimp tacos every single time.
Shrimp tacos or flatbread shrimp. Have you tried the firecracker
Yeah,
shrimp?
that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, firecracker shrimp.
The flatbread.
Yes. I am a huge fan.
Do you get
but
the cabbage or not the cabbage?
I get whatever they put on it.
Okay, so my kids won't eat the cabbage, so I get the cabbage on the side. Yeah, it's awesome.
So I usually order, and I've been doing this because Tom Anderson, the owner, is from my hometown, Wisconsin Dells. and I used to eat at his dad's restaurant. And since about the mid to early 80s, I've been eating the Bombers Special.
That's what my boys eat.
And Tom Anderson's dad, his nickname is Bomber. So that's where it came from. It was Bomber Special and uses the same great ingredients and recipe and just continues. I like the paper thin crust.
So do we.
I can eat the whole thing by myself. I hate to admit that, but
that's why we get two. The boys eat the Bombers, and then the shrimp is for me, and then we have some leftovers. It's awesome.
There's never leftovers for me. Anyway, on the podcast, our guests will follow the format for sharing their story this way. Number 1, what was it like? Number 2, what happened? And number 3, what is it like now? We will cover what was it like and what happened in segment 1, lead that into segment 2, what is it like now? And then your suggestions for thriving, which I can't wait to get to. And that's the education part of the podcast. We'll get to that in segment 2. So what was it like? Segment 1, what was it like before and what happened? You're a twin. You and Suzanne are 1 minute apart. Who is older?
She is.
She is. Mm-hmm. And what is it like to have a twin?
It's hard for me to explain what it'd be like compared to someone who doesn't have a twin because it's all that I know. But she has been my roommate and, closest friend my whole life. We went to college together too. And so the first time we didn't live together was when I moved for my job. And we were 21. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing. Barring any issues, when we kind of have an argument or something, we talk every day.
Wow. So big question I would have that just popped into my head is this. When you guys go someplace in the car, who drives and who has shotgun?
It's been a while since we've driven together because she lives in Pennsylvania and I'm out here. But usually her, because when I'm visiting her, I don't have a car. So she would, but I would always get shotgun.
You would always get shotgun.
Yes.
Raise your hand. Shotgun.
Shotgun.
Shotgun. All right. Tell us about the rest of your family growing up, mom and dad.
Okay.
First.
Yep. So my dad and my mom have been married for 48 years.
48? Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Yeah. And they're both in the outskirts of Philly, have been there.
Alive and well?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, my dad is fighting through lung cancer right now, but he is doing pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. But they're both really happy and been together for a long time. And they live not too far from my younger sister, Jackie, who has a daughter. So they spend a lot of time together with my niece, Lorelei. And then my twin sister and her family live in Chester Springs. I know you said you had a friend from Chester, but she's in Chester Springs. About 45 minutes, but the rest of my family, I have grandparents still, aunts, uncles, they're all out in Philly.
Tell us about your own family. I've crossed paths with 2 of those 4 folks. Probably just going to miss the younger one a little bit, but I think I'll meet him. And
I'm sure.
So go ahead and hit that. Your husband?
Yeah, Mike. He's from Wisconsin, which is what really brought us here. We've been married for almost 22 years, and we met through work.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have 3 kids together. So Michael's our oldest. He's a senior, so he's graduating in June. Mm-hmm. And then we have Caitlin, and you know Michael and Caitlin both. Yep. I don't want to brag, but Caitlin did pick you for her favorite teacher for parent appreciation or teacher appreciation.
Let's go.
Yep. And then we have, and so she's 16 and she's a sophomore. And then we have Ryan, who is 14. He's an 8th grader. So so pretty active in the community. We've lived here for about 20 years, which is interesting for Wanakee. Mm-hmm. A lot of people come in or go out, but I feel like we're one of the OGs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad we've crossed paths. It's
been
good.
Same.
So Archbishop Ryan, you played softball.
Yes, I was a pitcher.
And field hockey. I know about softball because I grew up playing actually fast pitch softball in more of like a men's league, watching my uncle and my dad played and some relatives play. So I knew firsthand slow pitch softball is big in the state of Wisconsin, but there are some pockets of fast pitch still. I know the softball part, but tell the listeners about field hockey. I mean, I think that is like lacrosse, the sport of lacrosse used to be mainly on the East Coast. I think field hockey is kind of sort of the same way.
Yeah.
More of an East Coast sport. So go ahead and tell us about field hockey a little bit.
So it's funny. I had never played field hockey till I got to high school. And that's probably because I grew up in Philly. Many of the suburban Philly areas played field hockey. So I think it's just financial that we didn't have a lot of experience with it. But the way that I came to it is I tried out for the soccer team and I didn't make it. And field hockey was the same season. And so I thought, I want to do something. And so my sister and our best friend, we played and we had a great time because most of the people that played field hockey were also on my softball team.
Oh.
And so it was more just something to stay active. Didn't know all the rules. In fact, I think even till this day, my dad still doesn't understand all the rules. Like it can't, the ball can't go through your legs and you can't lift the stick above your arm. And it's a ball almost like the size of a pool ball. And you hit it with a stick with a kind of a rounder end. It's really fun, and I know that it's growing in the East Coast, but many of the fancy schools were kilts, and we were the hardcore Philly school that wore Umbro shorts.
Well, hey, they were probably your soccer shorts, too.
They totally were. Yeah. Easy transition. My parents didn't have to buy me anything because I wore my soccer shin pads and my shorts.
Yeah. Save wherever possible.
And, in Philly, we were, doing what we could.
And so that's going to bring us to the next question, and I know the answer. Which was your favorite?
Softball.
Softball.
Yeah.
What did you like about softball? I know being the pitcher, you get to have the ball in your hand all the time, or the catcher.
Yeah, and my twin sister was the catcher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they used to call us the battery, the pitcher and the catcher.
Did you have any special signs like?
Oh, God, we used to fist fight, actually,
Fist fight, okay.
It wasn't great. My dad coached us for many of the years until we went to high school. And there'd be times where he'd be like, why are you getting your nails done? You're pitching. And he'd say to my sister, why are you getting your nails done? You're catching. Because we had a dance or something. And so I have some really fun memories of like us getting in fights. If I threw the ball too hard and it hurt her hand, she'd come out and throw the ball back at me and try to hit me in the head. Just funny memories of growing up. But it was my favorite. Missed a lot of things in the summer because I went to camps. But I would say it was the time I was the closest with my dad. He used to call my signs despite my coaches. He used to sit behind the cage to the right and I'd look over to him and he'd give me signs, and my coach hated it in high school. But it was a really fun time, and I think I chose not to play in college because I wanted to enjoy college life, and I did. But it was really fun, and I did it for probably 17 years, of just camps and winter camps, but it was really fun. It was really fun, and we were good.
I'm still going back to the, why are you getting your nails done? But I would, if it were the 2025s like it is now, you probably would have said to your dad, bro, I got priorities still too.
And it's the conversation I now have with my own daughter who plays softball is, why are you getting your nails done? You're not going to be able to fit your hand in your glove. And she's like, Mom, I have formal this weekend.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. The apple doesn't fall far.
It sure doesn't.
From the tree. Proud Bloomberg University grad. Why Bloomberg?
Now, again, I told you I grew up in Philly. My parents are both very hardworking. I don't feel like I missed out on anything, but there were two of us. And so I know we applied to a number of schools, and we both got into St. Joe's, which is a private Jesuit university, but incredibly expensive. And so I remember my parents saying to me, you can go there, but you have to live at home. Or you could go to a state school, and you could, move away, and it was about 2.5 hours away. So easy choice. We went to Bloomsburg, and we were roommates for all 4 years, my sister and I, so.
That's kind of crazy. What kind of degree then did you earn?
My degree's in psychology. Actually, my twin sister and I both have degrees in psychology.
And which one became the counselor? Obviously.
She did.
She did.
Yep. I went into sales.
And you went into sales, which is going to get into after your graduation.
Yeah.
Your first job is now still the job. Well, maybe not still the job you have now, but for the same company.
It is. Actually, by way of, I did start graduate school. I probably never told you that because it didn't last very long, but I went and started a degree to get my master's in social work at Bryn Mawr, and I just did not enjoy it. A friend that was in my sorority worked for Sanofi, and I remember growing up, when we'd go to the doctor, there'd always be like two people, and they were always really well dressed, and I always saw them talking to the doctors. It was probably when they were bringing in samples, and I thought, that's something I want to do. And so I had reached out to her at that time and said, hey, can you get me in? And she did. And so I got my interview, and I moved to the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and I got my first job. And I lived on my own, which was really hard because I'd never done that before without my sister. And I became an inside sales rep. And at the time, it was called Pasteur Mary You Cannot, which has now become Sanofi. But it was selling vaccines, and it's where I started my career and where I'm back at now. So
At age 27, you are diagnosed with RA, not resident assistant,
Nope.
but rheumatoid arthritis. You're an active person, running half marathons and triathlons, and you got this diagnosis, and then you're trying to balance motherhood as well. Tell the listeners, because we're going to have you back on to talk about, I think the rheumatoid arthritis is an episode in itself because it happens, but you had this happen at a very young age, 27.
Yep.
So tell us about rheumatoid arthritis.
I know you mentioned motherhood, and I didn't become a mom until I was 29. So I didn't have kids when I was diagnosed, but I had some weird things that sort of came up. If I think back in earlier times, I would have issues where I had like bursitis. So I would have pain in my shoulder, and I thought, oh, maybe I just lift it wrong. What really triggered it for me then was I had a trigger finger, which is hard to explain, but my brain was telling my finger to straighten out, but it was stuck. Kind of looks like this. And then the balls of my feet were really sore, and I thought, oh, it's probably because I've been running. So I kind of chalked it up to that. But the pains never really went away, and my finger never really fixed itself. And so I went to the doctor. She just said, for my physical exam, I looked totally normal, but they ran some tests, and my biomarkers came back positive with RA factor, which I had rheumatoid arthritis. I didn't really know what that meant. So they tried to put me on meds. I went on them for a little while and just kind of went on my way.
So you had the symptoms, but
I did.
Let's go back for a second to did they take some kind of blood test, do some blood work?
They did some blood work, and that's where they found the RA factor, but they also have to not only look at the RA factor in your blood, but they look at the physical exam. So I was sort of asymptomatic, so I didn't have some of like the stereotypical symptoms, but the blood work came back as such that I did. And so they put me on meds because with rheumatoid arthritis, it's symmetry. So it affects the joints. So it would be both sides of your shoulders or your fingers or both wrists. For me, it's both of my wrists and my hands, both sides, where you have joint stiffness. And really what it comes down to is your body thinking that it's sort of an invader and it tries to attack, but it's really attacking your own body. So it has some erosion and some pain. So I went on medicine to help with the pain, but also because it helps to slow down the progression of the disease. I was 27. I didn't really think much about that, but it did become an issue at 29 when I wanted to start my family. So I took myself off my meds because you can't have a baby when you're on meds.
Some meds.
Some meds. These meds for sure not. And so I took myself off, and then I found a rheumatologist in Wisconsin because we had moved. And so once I saw my doctor and realized that the pain wasn't going away, I realized it was much worse. And having a pregnancy was really helpful because my body went into remission. Because the genes of my husband as part of the baby. So I felt a lot better, but everything seemed to get worse when the baby would come out. And that became progressively worse each time I had a kid. And I would say my youngest, Ryan, was probably the worst I ever was because of the pain I said I had in my wrists. It's really hard to change a diaper or hold a baby or wash your hair or do a lot of the things that we take for granted when your wrists don't actually work. Sort of battled with different meds because nursing was really important to me too, to the point where I couldn't take like the real meds until I was done having kids and nursing. So I kind of battled with the pain for a long time until I was done having kids. So I would say my last child came at 33. So I didn't really do anything about it until I was closer to 35. So I pretty much battled with pain for a long time.
At age 38, then kind of the real reason we're here to talk about thyroid cancer. You're diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And we talked off air that, and I don't know if this is you downplaying it because of just who you are.
That's just what I do.
But you didn't seem to think that that was real tough. When you've got a couple that with rheumatoid arthritis, you've got a couple that with raising 3 kids, and then you mentioned a couple of the glaring symptoms of having to pick up a child, having to change a diaper. You just didn't want to get diagnosed with anything because you already had something. What were your initial thoughts when the doctor came in and, sat you down and et cetera?
RA was a little easier for me to deal with because I felt like I always defied it. If I could run a half marathon, if I could do a triathlon, I must not have RA. And so I never really told people about it, and I hid it pretty well. I just always said to people, don't grab me by my wrists or my hands. The thyroid cancer was a little bit different because it wasn't anything I had ever expected. And at this time, just to kind of lay the setting of where I was, my husband traveled quite a bit for work. So I was essentially, the primary caregiver for our kids when he was gone. My youngest would have been just about starting kindergarten, and then Michael's 4 years older, so somewhere between like 5 and 9. That's how old my kids were. I was working out regularly. I was happy. I was making it work. And then one day I had a sore throat, so I just assumed that I had strep because my kids were coming home from school sick all the time, that I would go to the doctor and just get a prescription. But when I went, she had said that my throat, like around my throat, looked a little swollen. Or I always joke, and I was like, she said you had a fat neck. And because I laughed it off because it was just easier. And she said, you know what, I'm a little concerned. And I'm like, well, I don't have strep. And she's like, I think we need to do some blood work, which didn't come back well, which then led to me to have a biopsy, which did not come back well. And so I never actually got to sit in the doctor's office to find out I had what she thought was cancer. I got a phone call. And the phone call was, let's say it was on a Wednesday where everything was normal. This call came on Thursday, and it was like, your biopsy didn't come back well, so it could be one of two things. And I'm like, what could it be? And she's like, it could be thyroid cancer. And you're like, wait, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah, it was like, how can yesterday have been one day where I was thinking and planning to Thursday, which was like, you have cancer. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I didn't even see a doctor. How can I have cancer? How do you know that? Wouldn't I know that?
They have you come in and we need to bring you in.
Well, it's not like it is on TV. They're like, well, we'll have you come in and see the surgeon, but you can't see the surgeon for like 3 weeks. And you're like, wait a minute. You just dropped this ball on me that I have cancer.
You dropped the C word on you.
And you can't get me in to see the doctor? So what do you think I'm going to do? I went back to what you said in the beginning. I Googled it. Don't do that. I wouldn't advise it. All of the worst scenarios that I could possibly read said you could have papillary thyroid cancer or you could have the other kind. And I think it's like medullary. Anyway, the papillary would be best case scenario. The other kind would be bad, and they didn't know which one it was. But there was a suspicious nodule in my thyroid, and the only way they would know what it was is if they took it out. Okay. Of course, I'm talking to my husband. I'm talking to my sisters. My mom, we're crying on the phone, and here I am not sure what the future would hold, and I had to pretend everything was fine for my kids because they were little. I finally got into a doctor, Dr. Schneider at UW Health, and he just said to me, you're going to be okay. We're going to take out he said, we have options. We could take out half of your thyroid and you wouldn't have to take meds, or we could take the whole thing out. And I'm like, take it out. Take all of it out. And that's what we planned on. So I think I was at the doctor in October, and I had my thyroid scheduled to be removed in December of that year. It was the scariest time I've ever had because I guess I didn't know what that meant. So I think the question was like, how did I deal? Not very well.
Well, it sounds like you did probably what some people I've had on now. Don't be a Google doctor.
Don't do it.
Don't do that. I've heard that. And if you're going to be a Google doctor, go to the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic and go to their sites, because you're going to get, just two things. Mm-hmm. And then you started to lean on family.
Yeah, I actually had a really good friend who had thyroid cancer before she had kids. And so she was a really helpful wealth of knowledge. And so her journey was a little bit different than mine, but it was really helpful to know that here she was. I think for her it was 10 years later, and she was still here. So that was really helpful, but I leaned on family. But I would say, and I'm embarrassed to admit it to you now because I know we're talking about coping and thriving, but I was in a serious position of bargaining. I told you I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I went to church, mm-hmm. and I prayed, and I do pray now, but it was different. I went into church and I prayed, if you couldn't make this be okay, I promise you I'll never curse again. I'll never say anything bad about anyone again. I'll never, lose my patience with the kids. I did so much bargaining. Did it work? I don't know.
I think that ends up when we hit a rock bottom, or when we go into something that we didn't expect. And if it's got to help us become a little bit better person, great. we're having you on the podcast because I want you to share your journey so that you can help somebody else, like your friend helped you.
Yeah.
And give somebody some hope, because we're going to date you a little bit, but okay, so you got diagnosed at 38 and you're how old now?
I just turned 48. So
You've had
this
10
year
years.
will be 10 years, which anybody who has cancer knows 10 years is a really significant time, because then I won't have to keep doing yearly checkups.
So you're going to be giving somebody some hope that has this same diagnosis, that you too can get through this, but here's the 5 things which we're going to eventually get to. Yeah. So because our listeners want to hear more about your coping strategies, we're going to talk about that sponsor one more time, and then we're going to get to segment 2. So Buck and Honey's has been with the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew since the beginning. With 4 locations in the Madison area, one is always near. People ask why Buck and Honey's. Owner Tom Anderson places a high priority on the mental health of his on the mental health of his employees. He has a mental health professional available for them should they need support. I don't know how many businesses go above and beyond their employee assistance program, but Buck and Honey's and Tom Anderson does. At age 38, Christine Gruetzmacher is diagnosed with thyroid cancer. You'll find out in segment 2 how she survived and thrived. Please stay tuned. Don't change the channel. You're not going to want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. We'll be back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency Crisis Services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat, visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim Decora. The podcast is where I feature guests who share their story and hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. Christine Gruetzmacher is here today because it's in her genetic makeup to help others. She's a big volunteer, but help others. She's going to share her story of surviving and thriving with a cancer diagnosis. And that cancer was a thyroid cancer diagnosis at the young age of 38. And that was on top of a rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis at the age of 26. So she's got some things going on, but she is what I would call a warrior mom with 3 happily married and 3 kids, and then doing all of this on top of taking care of her body with a number of different things, exercise and yoga, and she's a role model for being a warrior mom, and that's why I probably kind of gravitate to her a little bit. So you're past that initial shock of your diagnosis. This would be maybe now a week to 2 weeks, maybe the month after that diagnosis. Did your thoughts change about thyroid cancer versus that first 1 to 2 hours to 1 to 2 days?
Once I met with the surgeon and found out our game plan, I felt more in control. I think it was the timeline of where, you get the news and then you have to wait to see the doctor, that you just aren't sure of what your next steps are because you haven't met with the professional who's going to tell you, here's what's happening. And so once I met with him, he said something to me that I still think about. And he said, honestly, your chances of getting hit by a car are bigger than you dying from thyroid cancer.
That puts it into perspective and a
it
little more
felt better.
positive spin.
Yeah. And he said, if I have Vegas odds, if I went to Vegas tomorrow, I'd bet on the fact that you'd be okay. And so that did feel good. And then we scheduled a surgery date and my mom flew out to take care of the kids. And that was really helpful to have her here. She stayed the whole time after surgery and was here when they called to tell me what the results are, because in the movies, when you wake up, you know that you're okay. But in reality, you have to have pathology done, and that takes another 2 weeks. So it's a lot of waiting, and that's really hard. In that time of waiting, I really leaned on my mom and my husband. It was great to be distracted with my kids. I had an awesome rheumatologist. She's the one who I had to lean on during this time, because when they were worried about my cancer, they took me off all my thyroid meds. Or when they were worried about my cancer, they took me off all my rheumatoid arthritis meds.
Okay.
She was really great because she, tried to, ease my concerns, put me on meds that I could take before surgery just to help with my physical pain. And then, of course, I had a good, close group of friends, Nikki, Nicole, Kristen, Gina. You guys were there for me in that time, and they're still here for me now. And they would help me with my kids. They helped me with just positive thinking. They took me out to dinner, all these great things. And it was just a really nice way to be distracted from what we were worried about, which is that the news would be bad. And luckily it wasn't. So
Wanakee has our community, and where I taught for 29 years, I've seen so many faces and names and hear about situations with diagnoses and bad things happening that we tend to rally around those people. And that's what I've really liked about our community, is that you hear a lot of those stories, and makes me feel happy about where I live and that we're looking out for each other. What did your treatment plan look like? So when I think of cancer, you added one more thing to that. So I think of chemotherapy, I think of radiation. My wife is going through some bladder cancer, so she's doing the immunotherapy. And then the fourth one that you added to that is just surgery. Take it out.
I don't ever want to minimize, the battle that your wife is going through. And even my dad, I've seen the things he went through. I feel very lucky in the fact that I had my thyroid removed, and I didn't need chemo or radiation because they got everything out. And what's interesting about this whole journey is that the nodule that they suspected that was cancer was not. It was not cancerous. But because they took my whole thyroid out and then did the whole cross-sectioning, they found a microcancer somewhere else. I'm now flagged as having thyroid cancer, but I feel really lucky that it wasn't to the extent of after treatment that many others have to go through. Radiation is always something that's there for me in the future should I need it if the cancer returns, but it was just constant monitoring, blood work, that kind of stuff for the last 10 years. So
I think the listeners that are tuning in because they saw thyroid cancer or they did a Google search for podcasts that talk about thyroid cancer, I think people need to hear that either severity, I don't know what severity this is on a 0 to 10 scale.
I think it's better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people say if you're going to get a cancer, you're going to want to hope it's thyroid, and I don't think anyone wants cancer, but thyroid cancer grows very slowly. I feel lucky that it offered me some adversity, and that the end result was a good one, but it helped me to make a lot of different decisions, moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And we talked about that off air.
Yeah.
So in addition to your physical treatment of we're going to have surgery, were you doing anything for your mental health specifically with either some anxiety, some depression, or any other symptoms that would cause you to be acting abnormally? And also, did your healthcare provider help in finding you the resources that you needed?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm a feisty Italian, and admitting that I had anxiety was not something that I really like to do. But following this, I had some serious health anxiety. Again, my rheumatologist was terrific. She actually put me into this pool to recommend if I could get in and get accepted to a health psychologist. Apparently UW has some health psychologists. The demand is much higher than what they have. I think they have 2 or 3. And I was accepted, which I laughed to myself because I'm like, it's great that I got accepted, but it must have meant that they thought I really needed it. And I did. So I went and saw this psychologist with UW, and she was amazing. And when I met with her, she validated all the things that I had concerns. And one of the things she said to me was, it's okay to realize that you got a bad deal, because I think I just wanted to be tough and say, well, it's not fair. I don't drink alcohol and I don't drink caffeine and I eat right and I work out. Why did I get cancer? And someone who, eats Big Macs and smokes and is overweight, they don't have it. I just was trying to rationalize why I would get it, or why would God do that to me? And she helped me to realize that everybody has different buckets. And mine was more full when I got there. So because I have autoimmune disease in my family, maybe my bucket was just more full than someone else's. And so what we really focused on when I met with her was mindfulness. And that was interesting to me because I'm like, yeah, I practice mindfulness, but I didn't really know what that was. And so I think I told you about this, but it's like really profound in my mind, and I've tried to practice it with my kids. We spend more time thinking about things that happened in the past and more time worrying about what's coming in the future than actually staying in the present. I've really tried to be mindful of where I am in the moment and enjoying those times. Now that I have a kid that's 18 and a half and graduating, going to college, enjoying the moments that I have left with him in my house, enjoying the fun time, that I have with my other kids or just with Mike and I. So being really present and mindful. She taught me about doing check-ins, a couple times a day. Nobody even has to know that I'm doing it, but like checking in with different parts of my body, like how am I feeling? Am I doing okay? And no one knows that I'm doing that, but I'm just kind of checking in on my heart rate and am I feeling good? And if I'm not, what's happening? What can I do? Time to get up and take a walk. We practice breathing, which I practice with my daughter, who sometimes gets anxious about, bad weather or things like that. Like just stopping, counting to 10, taking a deep breath, trying yoga, working out, taking me time. These are things I didn't do before, but I did. And then I think the other biggest thing that we did besides getting the professional help, I actually got medicated. And I think that was sort of taboo for a long time. I was afraid that I wouldn't still be me, but I'm very much still me, but with a distraction. So instead of perseverating on things all day, something crazy when I say it out loud, but it felt totally normal running through my mind, it helped me to kind of remember that I was getting caught up in something that I didn't need to be caught up in. So I think a combination of all of those things helped me to be where I am today, which is an advocate for medication if you need it, an advocate for speaking to someone that's outside of your immediate circle because you don't think they're judging, and then just taking that self-help time to check in with yourself to make sure that you're okay.
I want to go back to the symptoms because they all look a little bit different, but there's always some commonalities. If somebody says, what were your 5 things that what were the 5 symptoms that really bugged you with your health anxiety is what you called it. Mm-hmm. 3 are probably similar, or maybe all 5, but can you, and I'm not asking you to say all 5 if there were 5, but what were your biggest ones with your anxiety?
So I'm always one who feels like we have great healthcare here. So if something doesn't feel right, and you know your body, I know my body well. If something felt off, call the doctor, go in and get an appointment. The problem is every time I went in, they found something. And my husband would say to me, that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing that they're finding something wrong, that they can come up with a plan. Well, it just felt like to the point where I'm like, then I'm not going to go to the doctor anymore because every time I go, I find something wrong. And that was really against who I was, but it was just being afraid of what the verdict would be. And that told me, okay, I need a little bit of help. The second thing is just this anxiety of when my kids or my husband weren't with me, that something bad was going to happen. And that can go, as you might know, terribly wrong in your head if you let it. And so, they'd get in the car and I'd be like, oh God, please don't let them get into a car accident. And it would just unroll to a point of like, that sounds crazy, but it's where my head was at the time, that I'm like, I'm just in a bad funk that, if I think it could happen. I didn't think I was going to get cancer and it happened. So just feeling, and I say the word perseverate, but like something that would be simple, I would perseverate on all day long to the point where it got so much bigger and worse than it ever could have been. And that if I said it out loud, it sounded insane, but in my mind, it was totally normal. And it was always worse at night. Everything's always worse at night. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I felt like, okay, I got to do something here. And, I tried to change my diet and exercise. None of those things worked. It wasn't until I got medicated and talked to a professional that I was able to realize that those things just needed a little help.
Here are your 5 suggestions that allowed you to survive and thrive with a thyroid cancer diagnosis. And you actually already covered some of these, but we're going to fast forward to number 5. And for those of you that are listening at home and you're used to this point of writing stuff down and pulling out the notebook and writing what Christine talked about, we're going to review those here in a little bit. So if you didn't get those, we're going to review them in a little bit. But number 5, you have this mantra, and I when you sent the bio to me, I read it, and that's kind of where I got to that, thinking of you as this warrior mom. So the mantra sounds and goes like this: dream big, work hard, stay focused, and surround yourself with good people. Listen to your body, defy limitations, and always ask for help. You got the defy limitations, I think, is on one side of the scale, and asking for help is on the other. And I'm glad you said both. And then I think everything else falls in between there. So you're covering everything. Go ahead and talk about your mantra.
I think that when you get adversity that comes to you, you start making decisions about things. And you realize life is short. And you don't want to spend it with people that don't care about you. You don't want to spend it doing things that you don't enjoy. If anything, this has taught me that I'm going to do things that I enjoy and be surrounded by people that care about me and that I care about. There's nothing wrong with staying focused on what your goal is. And for me, it's my family. It's my friends. And if those things that are out there don't give me joy, I don't do them. And for people who know me, I have a real hard time saying no to a lot of things when someone asks me to do something. But now that I work full time and that I have really busy kids events, I do what makes me feel good. And the decisions that I make are about giving back and helping others. So while I don't like to talk a lot about thyroid cancer and I don't like to talk about RA, I think coming onto this podcast is a big step for me because I normally kind of tuck those things down and hide it with humor. So if this is helpful to someone, that makes me feel really good because I'm at the point in my life where I'm saying, you know what? If you have a plan, do it. Work hard for it. Defy what people told you that you couldn't do. I defied it when I had RA. When people said I couldn't do something. Yeah, you can. You can run a half marathon. Yeah, you can do a triathlon because someone thought I couldn't. But if you know that something doesn't feel right in your body, listen to it. Go to the doctor. Call the doctor. We have great healthcare here in Madison, and I'm so thankful for the doctors that listened to me and allowed me to explore alternative options, and were always there for me. Who listened to what my number one goals was just to be there for my kids. So I think about all these things on a daily basis, and I guess the big one that I work at often because I'm not good at it is asking for help. I didn't always do that, but I do it now because you can't do it by yourself.
Exactly. When you were talking and sharing, and I wanted to chime in with a question about something, I was just getting all wrapped up in listening to you talk about your passions. And I love to be around people who are passionate about a lot of the things that you talked about, and I could just feel it coming off of you. But it sounds like you, and I use this analogy a lot, and I hear about it a lot in mental health, where I was just out to Washington, D.C. and flying out and flying back, and they go through the, if the cabin pressure goes down, the mask will pop down, pull, tug, put the mask on yourself first. And that's to make yourself happy first and then help somebody else put their mask on. I think I was doing it differently growing up all these years. I was helping so many other people out. And when people would ask me to do something, I would, and it wouldn't always make me feel happy. Now I'm the other way around. It took me a little longer, and I'm glad you figured that out a little earlier so that you're going to help more people. And like you said, by coming on the podcast, just because of who you are genetically, I think your heart is open to everybody. And I think
Thanks.
You figuring that out early is good for the rest of the world. What an episode. I'm so glad you could join us today. Your journey through rheumatoid arthritis, RA, at a young age, and a thyroid cancer diagnosis were some pretty major hurdles to cross. Many people in your position might choose unhealthy coping strategies, but you didn't. Today, you shared parts of your story that reminded us of how important it is to listen to your body and ask for help. Call to action. Christine Gruetzmacher just shared her amazing story and her experience as a thyroid cancer survivor. She also shared her 5 suggestions that helped her get through a physically and mentally challenging diagnosis. So for those of you that are at home and you're used to grabbing the notebook and writing things down, here they are. Number 1, mindfulness and being present. Number 2, regular body check-in. Number 3, practicing breathing, yoga, and visualization. Number 4, seeking professional help when needed. And here's her mantra, dream big. This number 5, dream big, work hard, stay focused, and surround yourself with good people. Listen to your body, defy limitations, and always ask for help. Final thoughts as we close another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. Are there any final thoughts, Christine?
Thank you for suggesting that I do this. Special thanks always to my husband and my kids, my family, my friends. And if you're able, I would recommend donating to the American Cancer Society. That also makes me feel good, and I think it will help others. While research in all the different areas of cancer are out there, do it if you can. Thanks.
If you have that extra little dollar hanging around, tuck it into one of those American Heart Association boxes or wherever you can find it.
Yep.
Amazing stuff. I'm so glad you could come on today. On our next episode, we will have another amazing guest in the Buck and Honey's remote studios who will share how they survived and thrived. If you have a story to share or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecora@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.